We know that at least 4 people have reportedly been injured in Israel after a barrage of more than 50 rockets was fired from Lebanon, targeting the area of Nahariya. Now, the video that you're looking at was posted on social media by former Israeli government spokesman Eylon Levy, and it shows some of those rocket interceptions overhead. We've seen a lot of similar scenes over the past several months. Now, this, of course, comes as sirens are sounding across Israel almost daily amid the rocket fire from the Hezbollah terror group over in Lebanon. Those barrages getting larger and even more intense, and we learned earlier this week that Israel had killed Hezbollah's next leader in a strike just days after the killing of Hassan Nasrallah, the head there of Hezbollah. And just last week, Israel did eliminate Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, but there are still questions there about who will lead the terror group next. Obviously, a lot of different topics to discuss this morning, so I do want to bring in a friend of the show, John Strawson, an emeritus professor in the Department of Law, Justice, and Policing at University of East London. Thank you so much, as always, for taking the time to be here with us today.
Good morning, Josh.
Good morning. Well, first off, I do want to ask you about this barrage of rockets, because it does seem like this now is a daily occurrence, regardless of whether it is a Jewish holiday there in Israel. You see these barrage of dozens of rockets fired by Hezbollah.
Well, this is a significant day in Israel because it's in the Hebrew calendar. It's the anniversary of what was the October the 7th massacre in the common calendar. So that's a very important event. Look, on the whole, we've had about just over 200 rockets a day being fired at Israel, even since the assassination of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah. And definitely the organization has been degraded. But this 200 seems a great deal, but it's not exactly what the Israeli intelligence and military thought would be taking place. They imagined that there would be an attempt to what they called a swarm attack, perhaps several thousand rockets at once, in order to try to overcome the Israeli air defenses and missile defenses. So, in fact, it's been quite significant that this has not happened. So I think we have to say that that this looks extremely serious, but it's not quite what the Israeli intelligence and military are prepared for. So for us, it looks a terrible result. And of course, it's terrible for the injured Israelis, but it's not quite the disaster which many had predicted.
And I do want to pop up this image that we do have coming in from the Israel Defense Forces as well, as we talk about some of the findings there in Lebanon, because the IDF does say that they were releasing photos here showing these grenade launchers, shoulder-fired missiles, RPGs, other weapons that the military does say were found inside of a mosque in a civilian neighborhood there in southern Lebanon. What does that say to you as you look at the photos and you hear that information? Because this is not the first time that we've seen weapons found in an area like a mosque.
This doesn't surprise me at all. I think that Hezbollah is very much rooted amongst particularly the Shia population, within the Shiite villages, within the southern Lebanon area. Undoubtedly, they have become military encampments, probably not the desires of the civilian population who live there at all, but nonetheless, that's what they've had to deal with and put up with. And I suspect that they will find that military caches of arms and other headquarters are in houses, flats, schools, and other institutions, and definitely including mosques. So I think that Hezbollah has integrated itself. Of course, it's part of the population, and therefore it would see this as being perfectly understandable. But of course, it is a major breach of the laws of war, which says that you cannot use civilian buildings for military purposes.
I wanted to ask, what is your overall assessment of when you talk about Lebanon, the people there, and their thoughts on Hezbollah? Because we're talking about a terror group that has embedded itself inside of this area with civilians and things of that nature. So what are the overall thoughts on the Lebanese people when it comes to Hezbollah?
Well, of course, the Lebanese population is very split between different factions, different religious communities. The Shia population is probably about 40 to 45% of the population at the most. There are also a large number of Christians, particularly Maronite Christians. There are Sunni Muslims, and there are a Druze population. So it is not the case that there is one view of Hezbollah. Today, the Prime Minister of Lebanon, Najib Mikati, has actually said that he is prepared as part of a ceasefire deal to deploy 8,000 troops in the south of Lebanon to prevent Hezbollah from operating under that resolution 1701, which was passed at the end of the last Lebanon war in 2006. And at the same time, quite interestingly, President Macron of France has announced a 100 million euro investment in Lebanon, which obviously would go some way towards helping that kind of deployment. So I think the international community has to step up to the plate, because the key thing to marginalize Hezbollah is to build a strong Lebanese state, which can act in the interest of all the people in Lebanon. And that simply has not been the case over the past few years. And that's precisely why Hezbollah has become so powerful.
I want to pop up these images here as we talk a little bit more about the classified document leak, because Fox News now reporting via a senior U.S. defense official that those classified documents that were leaked and posted to Telegram were actually not Israel's specific plans for an attack on Iran, but instead that the documents are descriptions of satellite images showing Israeli warplanes that are preparing for a strike and practicing air refueling. Now, the official does say there's no information in the documents about any targets or anything of that nature that could harm the plan. So my question for you, what do you take away from that information and that assessment there from Fox News?
Well, this looks like a Department of Defense appraisal of what Israel's capacities are in any response to Iran, or the likely response to Iran, rather. And I think that that's the worrying thing. What one really sees in these documents, as you say, there's no mention of targets. And what you really see is the way in which the Israelis would launch an attack, which is not surface-to-surface missiles, but in fact the use of two air-to-surface missiles, which would be launched from aircraft, which are the ROX missile and also the Golden Horizon missile. And we did not know until these documents were published that Israel had the second, the Golden Horizon missile system, which is very, very accurate. And we did not know precisely, of course, how Israel was thinking of attacking Iranian targets. So what it appears to be that the Israelis want to do this from the air, which gives them two things: much more flexibility, and also, of course, a greater degree of surprise, and actually, with these missiles, greater accuracy. But of course, this is not a good thing to have warned the Iranians about, because whatever the target is, the Iranians now know that what they need to do is to upgrade their anti-missile systems.
Would you have expected that weeks later we would have seen that attack on Iran from Israel already? Because, of course, that is in response to the 180, that barrage of ballistic missiles that was fired by Iran at Israel earlier this month. So do you think that we would have normally seen the attack, the retaliatory attack, by now, or does this make sense to you?
It makes sense in this because what the Israelis have been doing in Lebanon is trying to degrade Hezbollah, because as far as the Iranian military strategy is concerned, Hezbollah was the front line, one of the front lines they had. So in any attack by Israel on Iran, a serious attack, Hezbollah was meant to use its strategic weapons against Israel, which meant that there would be not just a reply from Iran, but also from Hezbollah. So I'm not surprised that the Israelis have been going after the arms caches. They say they've destroyed 2/3 of them, but we have to take that with a pinch of salt. But that would still leave, by the way, 50,000 missiles left. And also, we don't quite know what missiles have been destroyed.
I do also want to ask you about reports that indicate the deputy chief of Hamas's political bureau arrived in Moscow to meet with Russian officials. What is the relationship there between Hamas and Russia overall? Are they allies?
Well, don't forget, the Russians have big interests in the Middle East. They have a naval base in Syria. They have been arm wrestling over what the future of Syria will be with the Iranians. They quite like meddling in the Middle East. They think it's strategically important for them. And therefore, I don't think they have any love for any Islamist organization whatsoever, because, of course, they have their own Islamist insurgency out of originally Chechnya and now more broadly speaking. So I don't think they have a love for Hezbollah, but what they find it is a tactical convenience for them to be able to have some influence and to continue to keep up the heat on the West, basically, by making sure that the Middle East is not secure and is not calm. So I think that's why they're doing that. That's why they have those kind of relationships.
All right. John Strawson, as always, thank you so much for taking the time to join us and break down some of the latest developments there. Anything else you want to add really about any of this before I let you go?
Well, of course, we've been talking about a ceasefire for a very long time in Gaza. And now we actually do have quite interesting developments about a ceasefire in Lebanon. It's quite clear that the Israelis feel they've done quite well in Lebanon, because unlike in Gaza, where they didn't have much intelligence, in Lebanon they've had very good intelligence. They think it's going much better. It's certainly gone much better than 2006. All the predictions of a land incursion were going to be a disaster. Amos Hochstein, the UN special envoy to Lebanon, was in the region this week. And I think that what his discussions with Nabi Berri, the Shia, but not Hezbollah, speaker of the Lebanese parliament, does actually begin to show that the Israelis are preparing themselves for at least a separate deal to end the conflict in Lebanon. And that obviously would be a very good thing for everyone concerned.
All right. John Strawson, as always, thank you so much for being here with us. We really appreciate it. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye-bye for now.